Hello, this is David Wilson with Reed Tech. Recently, we've been getting a lot of questions from our clients and industry regarding the over-the-counter monograph user fee program, or OMUFA, that FDA has recently enacted. And we invited our friend Carolina Wirth, who's of counsel with Arnall Golden Gregory, a law firm where she's based out of the DC area and is a legal expert on FDA regulations. So thanks for joining us and welcome, Carolina.
Thanks, David. I'm excited to be here to hopefully shed some light on some of these burning questions on OMUFA.
Yeah, and it was something that didn't necessarily catch those of us who scour the regulations off guard, but it wasn't something that was necessarily getting shouted from the rooftops or published in the daily news, right? So this is definitely something that it has a big impact as well on industry, and it's not something that the over-the-counter manufacturers were accustomed to. So they now get to participate in a similar type of process as our friends in the prescription drugs, medical devices, and generic drug industries. And yeah, if it's all right with you, I'd like to just start kind of rattling off some of these hardballs, and I promise I won't. I'll try to pipe them right down the plate and not give you any curves.
Sounds good. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's something that people, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they published the Federal Register notice and it was taken away, and then we republished, and the dates just got a little fuzzy for everyone. So I think that this May 2021 deadline just caught a few people off guard. So
yeah, and actually in doing some of the review for some clients, that was one of the first questions that was asked was, does this have to be paid every year?
Yes, it does. And the funny thing is, not only does it have to be paid every year, but it'll be adjusted for inflation. So these fees that we're seeing today for FY 2021, which is actually quickly coming to an end because FDA's calendar year or fiscal year actually ends at the end of September. Those fees are not going to be the same that you're going to pay every year. So we'll see adjustments based on the number of companies, and we'll see adjustments based on inflation as well. So stay tuned, but it is a yearly fee.
Yeah, and one of the other things I saw was that this fiscal year 21's fees were due at a different date than what the future fees may be. Is that something that you can comment on, and is that accurate, or was I reading that incorrectly?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that because of the initial publication, if you remember, the CARES Act was passed in March of last year. FDA was supposed to issue a Federal Register notice soon after the CARES Act was enacted back in March, and they didn't, and it took some time, and then it was going to be in the fall, and then it was going to be, in the winter, and then all of a sudden it didn't come until this year. So it was a little bit delayed, and then they had that whole issue where once they published a notice, it was withdrawn and then republished. So yeah, we should expect to see this a little bit earlier next year in terms of payment. As I said, the fiscal year is pretty much almost over, and we're paying 2021 fees, right? So we should be, hopefully FDA will have the notices a little bit sooner, or maybe not, because now you have to pay twice in a year. But I don't think it's going to be this year, but it's going to be earlier than it was this year for sure.
Great. Yeah, and one of the common questions we've been getting is just regarding the two types of fees. So can you explain, the FDA's notice detailed the MDF fee and a CMO fee. So can you help explain what the two are and how they differ, or how these organizations may differ?
Yeah, sure. So under the CARES Act, there were two definitions, right, that FDA talks about, and is a OTC monograph drug facility, which is a foreign or domestic facility that, aside from meeting other minor criteria, is engaged in manufacturing or processing a finished OTC drug product. So you have somebody who's, making a finished product, sort of for their own company, right? So you're selling, sunscreen, for example, and you're making that and you're selling it to the public. So that's your company. You're an OTC drug manufacturer. When then you have, a contract manufacturing facility, which is a facility that's making That could be doing both, but basically it's making products for someone else. So they're not putting products in commerce directly. So when you think about, these are more like the private label distributors who are hiring a company to make their product, but the product itself is going to market with somebody else's name. So that's the basic distinction between the two. Either you're marketing, you're making something for yourself, or you're making something for others and not putting it directly in commerce yourself.
Right, right.
If that makes it a little bit clearer.
Yeah, it does. And so one of the common questions we then get is, well, what if we do both, right? What if we distribute products under our own label that we manufacture, but then we also manufacture products for other organizations as a contract manufacturer? So do those organizations owe both fees, or do they pay one or the other, or is it still kind of unknown?
No, they only pay one, and FDA has said they will pay the higher fee, so they'll pay
Okay.
the manufacturer fee, not the contract manufacturer. At least that was per FDA's last presentation. My understanding was they only pay one, so you're not gonna be paying twice
Got
if
it.
you're doing both.
Great, great. And in kind of along those same lines, then, if a manufacturer's an organization that has multiple manufacturing facilities, right? So if you're a organization, maybe even a multinational organization, you have facilities in the US, Europe, across the globe, are you paying per facility or is it per organization? How does that work?
So it's going to be per facility. So if you have, as you know, David, with RETAC, you have different registrations, right? So each facility that's an independent location is going to register with FDA. So as long as FDA is going to consider it separate facilities, as long as you're not on the same address or you're not close by, or you're in different locations and you have individual registrations. So
Okay.
if you have multiple facilities, you're most likely paying separate fees.
Yeah, great, great. Which I think that concept kind of led right to this next question, which was what is it? Is it the technical establishment registration SPL XML file FDA is using? What are they using to determine if an organization is an MDF versus a CMO, and if OMUFA fees apply?
So I think, as we probably warned others before, registrations became very important, registration and listings, because that's how you categorize your organization with FDA is how your fees will be assessed for OMUFA. So FDA fine-tune the codes the company can use, and you're probably more familiar with this business operation codes than I am, but they definitely fine-tune those. So if you are a manufacturer, you should make sure that you're using the correct code. If you're a contract manufacturer, you want to make sure you get that. There's, I think, only one business operation code for contract manufacturer versus, I think, 4 different ones for manufacturers versus contract manufacturers. So you want to make sure that when you register and you list, that you are properly describing your company operations, so that FDA knows which fee you owe.
Great. Yeah, that definitely helps. And that was typically a question we'd get, is like, well, what are they using to track all this? Which then leads to the next question we tend to hear is, well, what happens if we don't pay, or if we pay less than the amount that FDA believes we should be paying? What is happening to organizations? Whether it be, is there a list that they end up on, a naughty list, right, when they don't get their Christmas gifts or holiday gifts at the end of the year, or is it are there any types of actions the agency's taken, or have they determined actions that will be taken?
So in terms of what happens, and maybe just to clear, a little misconception, FDA did not send companies an invoice to begin the process. They didn't say, hey, now you owe us $20,000, whatever, $13,000. Companies were supposed to realize what their situation was and pay the money. But if you didn't, and you were confused, or you thought, well, this doesn't apply to me, or they haven't really finalized the fees, then FDA should have sent you by now a reminder telling you what fee you're supposed to pay and when. But if you still fail to do that, there is a list that FDA has published. It is on their website, and we can probably provide you a link to that list. But there is a list of companies who haven't paid, and that's public, and anybody can go and look to see if their company name or whatever company is on it. FDA, has not fully announced what happens after that, other than if you owe money, you won't be able to submit any kind of order requests, like monograph order requests, to the agencies until all the fees are paid. So if you're developing some kind of novel OTC drug, or you want to make a change to a monograph, and you haven't paid the fees that you owe to the agency, you're not going to be eligible to file one of those, and you're not going to be eligible to get a meeting with FDA to discuss your OMR. So those are things to keep in mind as you go forward. Those fees it might not be that FDA is going to have collections, a collection agency come to your door, but it will come back in the future if you have to engage with the agency in this space.
Okay, great. And then so if you are lucky enough to get an inspection, is that the type of thing where they could, if they're scheduling an inspection and you happen to be on that list, will they recognize, oh, well, the fees weren't paid, or is it still a little too early to tell with some of that?
It is definitely something that they can look for. It's just rolled out. I think it's not something maybe that immediately people would be looking for, but I would not be surprised if during an inspection, FDA double checks whether a company has paid their fees. So that's definitely a possibility.
Okay. Now, regarding the user fees or any issues, to whom should organizations correspond to or reach out to other than us, right? FDA side, who do you suggest they reach out to?
So FDA has set up a email address. It's just cedarcollections@fda.hhs.gov, and you can send questions to that. You can, let's say you think that they sent you something in error, that you don't owe money, that you went out of business, or you make APIs, you don't make finished dose products, right? Or you're manufacturing an OTC drug, but it's not under a monograph. It's actually under an NDA, under a new drug application. So if you have any of those situations and FDA has, for some reason, sent you a bill or reminded you that you owe, you can email FDA. As far as I know from our clients, FDA has been fairly responsive to questions through that mailbox. There's that you can reach out. That's probably the fastest way. More and more FDA is going to email rather than phone calls to answer questions to the public.
I can say that I did try calling the phone number once, and a live person answered. So it was refreshing in this day of, in this age of automated phone prompts and artificial intelligence that are answering phone calls, to actually get someone on the other line that was living and breathing. So
yeah, the funny thing is, the good old days of FDA work, I used to call FDA on a regular basis, especially with drug and listing questions, and say, hey, I have a question, and they would say, oh, sure, hold on, there's somebody here who can answer your question. So I would get a lot of questions answered over the phone. Doesn't happen as often, but maybe they can call you, David, and you can call them.
That's right.
On their behalf. But cedarcollections@fda is probably the easiest way to communicate with the agency.
Great. Yeah, and now if a company is appearing on this naughty list or the arrears list, and they believe it's an error, do they contact the same group, the collections?
Yeah, I would say they contact the same group and let them know that they have paid. A lot of, with the user fees with FDA, it can be tricky. You have to use the user fee system, which basically generates a cover sheet for the companies to use to send the money in. And it's usually a credit card or some kind of wire to FDA. That's the two preferred methods for paying. And, if you put a wrong number on that wire for whatever PIN number you get from FDA, your money could be stuck in limbo. So if you did pay and you find that you're on the list, you can contact FDA, and hopefully they can help you track down the payment. But it could be lingering somewhere in cyberspace if you made a typo somewhere.
So what I'm hearing is, don't show up at White Oak with a duffel bag full of cash.
No, rarely the money goes to FDA itself. It usually goes to the Department of Treasury, some bank. Actually, this one is for wire transfers, is sending it to New York. So yeah, do not show up to White Oak with any money. There's going to be no one there to take your check
Right.
or verify your registration. So your best bet is to contact the Cedar collections people, or the user fee sheet may have a contact for issues there as well.
Great, great. And then as far as kind of this idea of well, we were on this list, if there are any other disputes concerning the fees, does FDA provide a mechanism specific for OMUFA or any of the fees that they assess for disputes?
Yeah, I mean, again, you have to submit a request to
Okay.
FDA. There's a form 3913 that you can complete if you have any disputes about your fees, and you have to submit it to the Cedar Collections. I can imagine how many emails they're getting as we speak, but there is a form that you have to complete and a written request so you can complete your case the agency in terms of whatever reason. You don't think you'd have to pay the fee, or you will have to have substantiation, as we always tell our clients. For almost everything we do in the space, you need substantiation, so you will have to have documentation, right? So if you went out of business in November 2020 and you didn't make it through the year, maybe there's a reason to talk to FDA about maybe you're not really an active manufacturer anymore as of the end of 2020. So every situation will be specific, but it's always worth reaching out to. This is a new program, so it's always worth reaching out to the agency with any questions or doubts.
Great, great. Yeah, and I with the complications and changes that the pandemic has brought about with things like the temporary guidance for hand sanitizers, and then that being an area of kind of relief that the agency has said, organizations that are doing the temporary manufacturing of hand sanitizers for the health emergency, there are certain areas waived there. One of the things that I talk to organizations a lot who are going through that process and who started manufacturing hand sanitizers during the pandemic is, well, what's your long-term goal here? Is it to continue to market the hand sanitizer beyond the pandemic, or are you specifically acting in response to the call to action from the agency? So from your perspective, like, how early is too early to start thinking, well, if we were doing that, and if we know we're going to be manufacturing these products for the long haul, when should organizations start anticipating, yeah, we should really gear up to determine, do we even still want to be doing this based on this fee structure now?
Yeah, I think you start now. I mean, I have clients who started a year ago looking at long-term plans, right? They're still manufacturing under the formulation and the guidance and the enforcement discretion guidance, but looking forward towards becoming hand sanitizer manufacturers after the pandemic is over. I think now is as good as any, because as we starting to see sort of signs of things winding down in some areas, and maybe a less of a need for hand sanitizer, although that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. You want to think about what to do next, right? Because once FDA starts lifting these enforcement discretion guidances that they issued, that's going to be sort of the end of the game for those formulations, because those were, different, as you may know, than the formulations that are regularly on the market for hand sanitizer. So now make a plan. If you want to stay long term, just make a plan to know that starting, whenever that's over, you're going to have to pay the fee for the following year. And also, like, if companies are already making hand sanitizer or other types of sanitizer products. So, I mean, there's some companies that started making hand sanitizer, but maybe they were making, wipes or some other things that are outside of the enforcement discretion that are also, sanitizer kind of products. You may not qualify to not pay the fee. So you have to really see what your products are. If you were a distillery that solely got in the game to do hand sanitizer to help, that's a different situation than a company that added hand sanitizer but is already making wipes or something like that.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think we can agree on one thing, that the over-the-counter monograph user fee programs here to stay, and
Yeah,
in a lot of cases, the OTC monograph reform is creating a pathway for innovation and for things to happen quicker at FDA. And this is the part of the way that they've paved how this can work. And really do appreciate your time and knowledge and helping kind of demystify some of these questions that a lot of
of
the
course.
organizations we work with we're struggling with. And in Carolina, we look forward to the next time we get to chat and go over some of these tricky regulations as they pop up.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, David. And if any organization's listening and you have a more specific pattern and you need help, I'm here to help. So happy to, have you reach out directly with more specific questions. And until next time, this is always fun to chat with you, David. So thank you.
Likewise, Carolina, and thanks for joining and watching our event, and hope you have a great rest of your day.